In 1940, the British Army faced an invisible crisis on the battlefield, one measured not in bullets or tanks, but in minutes spent boiling water. In the smoke-filled chaos of North Africa and later in Normandy's hedgerows, British tank crews shared one universal ritual: the tea break. It was more than habit. It was an anchor of sanity in a world gone mad. Yet, in those few stolen moments to brew a cup, countless men were exposed, their positions revealed to the enemy by the telltale plume of steam rising from a battered kettle. At first glance, the problem seemed almost comically British, soldiers stopping mid-battle to make tea. But to anyone inside a Churchill or Cromwell tank, it was deadly serious. The heat inside those steel coffins soared past 50 degrees Celsius, and the crews, encased in wool, rubber, and metal, sweated through 12-hour shifts. Dehydration, exhaustion, and shattered nerves were as much the enemy as the Wehrmacht. Every cup of tea meant hydration, a burst of glucose, and a dose of comfort that could keep a man's hands steady on the trigger for one more hour. Psychologists in the Royal Army Medical Corps understood this well. They noted how caffeine and L-theanine, the chemicals in black tea, helped maintain focus and reduce fatigue. It was morale science before anyone called it that. The problem was logistics. To brew safely, crews had to shut down engines, dismount, or light small petrol stoves beside the tank. German observers soon learned to spot those pauses. Many after-action reports from 1941 to 42 list brewing halt as the cause of ambush or shelling. In one case near Tobruk, an entire squadron of Crusader tanks was caught mid-brew when Stuka dive bombers struck. Survivors later said the only warning they had was the whine of the sirens cutting through the whistling kettle. The British High Command began to notice a grim pattern. The army that couldn't live without tea was paying for it in blood. Yet nobody could order men to stop brewing. It would have destroyed morale faster than enemy fire. What the army needed wasn't discipline, it was design. The challenge was clear: find a way for crews to drink tea without ever leaving the protection of armor. As shells thundered across Europe and North Africa, a small group of British engineers began experimenting with an idea so absurd it was almost laughed out of the workshop: a boiling vessel inside the tank itself. The idea first took shape in the workshops of the Royal Armoured Corps in early 1943. Engineers and fitters, worn down by the same dust and heat as the men in the field, understood the problem better than anyone sitting behind a London desk. Among them was Peter Garfield, a soft-spoken electrical technician whose quiet persistence would change the daily life of every British tank crew for generations. His concept was elegantly simple: tap into the tank's existing electrical circuit to power a compact heating element that could boil water directly inside the armored hull. No open flame, no smoke, no exposure. It was a strange sort of revolution, born not in secret laboratories but in motor pools and makeshift depots. Garfield's first prototypes were crude bits of copper tubing, pressure valves salvaged from aircraft parts, and heating coils wound by hand. His colleagues joked it was the most British invention imaginable: tea before traction. But Garfield's logic was flawless. A tank's battery output, when the engine was idling, could easily handle the extra draw. With proper insulation, the water could boil safely without compromising other systems. Convincing command, however, was another battle. Many officers dismissed the concept as frivolous. In official minutes from the War Office, one colonel famously wrote, "The army exists to fight, not to take tea." But field data told a different story. Reports from North Africa and Italy showed that fatigue-related errors accounted for nearly a quarter of tank losses. Crews often made navigational mistakes or failed to spot ambushes simply because they were drained, thirsty, or heat-struck. The connection between alertness and hydration was undeniable. After months of quiet lobbying, Garfield's team received permission for field trials. The first tank-mounted boiling vessel, later known as the BV, was fitted into a Churchill Mark IV. It was nothing more than a small, metal flask-like cylinder with a lid and spout, bolted beside the gunner's position. Early tests were messy. Fuses blew, water overflowed, and in one memorable incident, the lid rocketed across the compartment, narrowly missing a loader's head. But within weeks, refinements turned chaos into reliability. The addition of an automatic thermostat and safety valve solved the overheating issue. When the final prototype passed safety trials, crews in training were invited to test it. What followed was nothing short of a morale revolution. Men emerging from mock exercises no longer staggered out pale and faint but alert and laughing, mugs in hand. For the first time, they could brew and drink within armor, even under fire. The British Army had unwittingly created one of the most enduring morale tools in military history. A kettle that fought alongside its crew. By 1944, the boiling vessel, or BV, as it was now officially designated, had spread quietly through British armored divisions preparing for Operation Overlord. To most outsiders, it looked like a trivial luxury. But inside the cramped hulls of Churchills, Cromwells, and later Comets, it was nothing short of a miracle. Each tank carried a crew of 5, sealed within steel walls that trapped the summer heat and magnified the winter cold. Air stank of oil, sweat, and cordite. Rations came from dented tins, often eaten cold between engagements. Yet now, between barrages, a man could reach behind his seat, fill a mug, and sip something hot and alive. It didn't just warm the body, it steadied the mind. Historians sometimes underestimate how much this small change altered combat rhythm. Before the BV, British units had to halt for brewing up breaks, standardized pauses that left them vulnerable to reconnaissance aircraft and artillery. German observers soon recognized the pattern. Smoke from petrol stoves meant British armor was nearby. Those telltale signals often drew fire within minutes. After the BV's introduction, those smoke trails vanished. Units could refuel and rest unseen, their silhouettes hidden, their engines idling quietly. It wasn't stealth technology in the modern sense, but it achieved the same result: invisibility born from discipline and design. The device itself was elegantly compact. A nickel-plated copper canister fitted with an internal heating coil, wrapped in asbestos insulation, with a pressure relief valve calibrated to open at 1.5 atmospheres. Power ran through a dedicated switch wired to the 24-volt electrical system. A thermostat cut off current automatically once the water reached just under 100 degrees Celsius. It could boil enough water for 5 mugs in 4 minutes, even while the tank was moving. Tests showed no measurable power loss to gunnery or communication circuits. The innovation was so sound that Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers recommended immediate large-scale production. And the soldiers? They loved it. Tank diaries from the 7th Armored Division, written during the advance through Normandy, mention the BV in the same breath as spare parts and ammunition. One sergeant wrote, "It's the only thing that never jams." Another crew claimed they would rather go without spare track pins than without their boiler. Officers who once mocked the idea now ordered retrofits for every vehicle under their command. In an army defined by stoicism and understatement, that was as close to a revolution as Britain ever allowed itself. The boiling vessel wasn't just an appliance. It was a quiet declaration that the British soldier's comfort, morale, and humanity mattered as much as his weapon. And in that realization lay a new kind of warfare, one fought not only with firepower, but with foresight. The success of the boiling vessel did not stay confined to the British Isles. As the war dragged into its climactic phase, word spread quickly through Commonwealth ranks. Australian, Canadian, and Indian armored units serving alongside British formations in Italy and France began requesting the same modification. For many of them, it wasn't about luxury, it was survival. In the humid heat of Burma, where dehydration killed as efficiently as bullets, the BV provided a consistent source of boiled, safe water in disease-ridden jungles. In the frozen mud of Holland, it kept crews alive during nights when temperatures plunged below freezing. It became, in essence, a portable hearth for a mobile army. Commanders soon noticed the side effects. Units equipped with the BV showed higher operational efficiency and lower rates of exhaustion. A tank that could brew tea without dismounting could stay alert for longer patrols, respond faster to orders, and reduce accidents caused by fatigue. It also strengthened something less tangible but vital: morale under pressure. Letters home began mentioning it, a small miracle of engineering tucked beside the machine gun racks. Families reading those words could picture their sons safe inside steel monsters, drinking something warm and familiar amid the storm of war. By early 1945, The British War Office had standardized the boiling vessel as essential equipment across all new armored production lines. Manuals for the Centurion tank, the new post-war mainstay, listed the BV alongside radio systems and fire control optics. The lesson had been absorbed completely. Fighting men performed best when treated as human beings, not just cogs in an armored machine. It was, perhaps, the most humane innovation of the entire conflict. The Americans noticed, too. U.S. Army officers seconded to British units during the European campaign recorded the BV's impact in their after-action reports. Though the U.S. would not adopt the same design until years later, they noted how British crews remained notably calmer during prolonged engagements. Soviet liaison officers sent similar notes back to Moscow, fascinated by what they called the T device. Decades later, the Russian army would implement their own version, a rugged samovar-style heater integrated into armored vehicles. For the British, however, the BV became part of identity. It was as inseparable from the image of a tank crew as the enamel mug clutched in a grease-stained hand. When peace finally came in 1945, hundreds of these vessels found new life. Mechanics unbolted them from retired tanks and fitted them into workshop benches, lorries, and even family caravans. The war was over, but the habit remained. A testament to a simple truth. Comfort, when earned amid chaos, becomes culture. And though Britain's empire would shrink in the decades ahead, one quiet export endured, the philosophy that a cup of tea, even in a war zone, could hold an army together. In the decades that followed the war, the boiling vessel became an invisible emblem of British design philosophy. Practical, unassuming, and quietly transformative. While radar and jet engines won headlines, the BV kept winning hearts. Every new generation of armored vehicle, from the Centurion to the Challenger, rolled out of factories with one tucked inside, standardized and trusted. To outsiders, it seemed quaint, an indulgence from an old empire clinging to its rituals. But to those who had lived inside the iron hulls of war, it represented something much deeper. Civilization surviving inside machinery built for destruction. In British doctrine, the boiling vessel eventually earned its own official designation. Vessel, boiling, electric. Military engineers noted it as essential as armor plating, because its presence meant the crew could remain sealed inside for longer periods during NBC, nuclear, biological, chemical conditions. What began as a morale experiment in 1943 had become a critical life support system by the Cold War. It was the only piece of wartime kit to transition seamlessly from fighting Rommel's panzers to enduring the atomic age. But beyond its technical merit, the BV story reflects the psychology of an island nation that fought not just for victory, but for normalcy. Tea in British culture was never merely a drink. It was ritual, rhythm, and reassurance. In the trenches of Flanders, in the foxholes of North Africa, and later inside the cold steel bellies of tanks, tea reminded soldiers who they were and where they came from. It was the last thread tying them to home, the small act that defied the dehumanization of mechanized warfare. The BV simply made that defiance sustainable. Historians often say that wars are won by logistics, not heroism. The British proved that sometimes logistics includes boiling water. A single device, built from copper, nickel, and resolve, saved countless minutes of exposure, countless lives lost to fatigue, and restored humanity to the men whose world had turned to iron and fire. Even today, modern British armored crews still refer to their boiling vessel with affection. They brew tea during long patrols in Afghanistan or Arctic exercises in Norway, the hiss of the element echoing through the hull just as it did in Normandy. It is no exaggeration to say that no army on earth understands the moral value of a hot beverage quite like the British. Peter Garfield's name never appeared in war memorials or on medals, but his quiet invention outlived every tank he helped design. It outlasted empires, reshaped military ergonomics, and became a small but enduring symbol of what it meant to be British under pressure. Calm, methodical, human. Because in the end, Britain didn't just fight the Nazis with rifles and tanks. It fought them with composure. And sometimes that composure began with a simple sip of tea.